from a spiritual battle, sending your children to military boot camp and maybe into harm's way that way is less dangerous than it is from a spiritual aspect being on campus.
I think they become more receptive to a message that says this will help me to belong, because rejection is such a painful dynamic in our psyche. Say, this child that I'm dealing with today is unique.
I mean, it does bring about that, the more awareness, like, oh, like my actions are my own now.
It says it's going live. There we go. Hey, everybody. Hope you're having a fantastic week so far. We are having a decent week. Today's topic I'm really excited to talk about. Let me preface it by saying it's a conversation, and like everything else that I talk about in this format of teaching tips, Holy Spirit trumps everything I say. If the Holy Spirit is speaking something different to you and your family, then by all means follow the leading of the Holy Spirit, because he is way smarter than I am. So I defer to him in all things. But what we're talking about today is the launch. And I am joined by Dr. Dale Callahan. Welcome, Doctor.
Hey, thanks, glad to be here.
So do they call you doctor? Do they, like, is that your professor name?
Every now and then. There's many other choice names, but yeah, usually I'm dealing with a more professional audience, so it's a lot more informal. So
yeah, okay, and if you could tell us a little bit about yourself. How many children do you have?
We've got 4 children. We got 2 daughters that are grown, and then 2 sons. So the 2 daughters are grown. One's married with 2 children. One is not married, in the workforce, and another one, our 2 sons, one's 19, graduated last year, and then we have a 14-year-old still here.
Awesome, and so you've launched 3, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, nobody warned you how difficult that is, do they?
There's no instruction manual, and besides what you find in the Bible, and it's not always as clear as you think it's going to be.
Yeah. They talk about the terrible twos, and then they talk about the terrible teens. They don't talk about the lousy launch. Like, like nobody warned me about this, and I was like, you guys can go. I'll make more. It don't matter. We're good. And now it's like we've launched 5, and 5, and my other 4 I'm just not launching. So
I had everybody jumping in on the app and Facebook. We've got Jess, Mandy, Chastity, Desiree, Irina. Over on Facebook we've got Clarissa, Anna, and Lauren.
Awesome. Well, and Dale, what is your one of the fun things that I enjoy talking with you is because of your career. What is your career?
So I'm an accidental academic. So I come from industry. Spent some 15 years or so in large telecommunication industry. Then found myself in an entrepreneurial setting for a couple of years, wandering around in the wilderness like most entrepreneurs do, and sold out of that, and kind of accidentally was asking advice of some people in academia, because I had just gotten a PhD, and suddenly nobody wanted to talk to me. It was the weirdest experience. You hear people talk about overqualified, and I determined what that means is they think you want too much money. It's really just a translation. And but I was finding myself kind of in a weird situation, because looking for what do I do next, and some guys started asking me, hey, we've got this graduate program at the university, We're looking for somebody with a PhD, industry experience, entrepreneurial experience, and you're the guy. And I refused them 7 times, and I said, yeah, I'll try it for a year. And that was many years ago.
Wow.
Wow. So now I'm in the university. So technically I'm in the School of Engineering, Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering. But my major role is this executive graduate program where we are helping professionals come back and prepare for leadership.
Yeah. Yeah. And which university did you say?
It's a University of Alabama at Birmingham.
Okay. So you also had written, just a little bit of background, you were looking for, well, I paraphrase this to everybody. Tell me if I'm right or wrong. Hopefully I'm right. You had realized in the college environment that homeschool students were really exceptional students in most areas except math. And that was one of the areas that they were weak in. And so you started looking for exceptional solutions to help prepare them for the college environment. You came across Jacob's Math, and that was one of the leading curriculums that you felt was there. And so you began working with that, and then you created the Ask Dr. Callahan series for the algebra and geometry, which we sell at Master Books. Is that a pretty accurate story? I hope so.
That's a little more generous. That's you made that sound like there was great planning, but like most of entrepreneurial effort, I mean, what really happened? We started homeschooling our 2 daughters in high school, and it was the first we ever heard of homeschooling. I literally did not know homeschooling existed until I talked to a business partner, and he said he was homeschooling his 6 children. And I came home and told my wife, I said, he's pretty weird. He's homeschooling, because I had literally never heard the term. And since then, God has a way of working things with you. Everybody we ran into, every conversation we had was with a homeschooler, and we couldn't run away from it. Literally for the next 3 years, there was no running away from it. But when we started homeschooling, my wife is an engineer, and being in high school, all of our new homeschool friends, they were like, well, how are you going to teach math? And we were like, well, that's not a problem. We can't teach English. We can't spell, but math is not a problem. And so they started asking us to help. And so it kind of came about accidentally that we were, yes, sure, we'll help. And that was the famous last words, sure, we'll help. And next thing we know, 3 years later, we're overwhelmed, and we had to come up with a solution to help. And so that's where the company. And so literally, I always say it's the cheesiest name I've ever heard of. Ask Dr. Callahan, but that's kind of how it happened. We'd be standing in a group, and somebody would look over and say, "How are we going to teach homeschool math?" And they would say, "Oh, let's go ask Dr. Callahan." And kind of tongue in cheek, but that's what happened. And, but yeah, we've been doing that for a lot of years now. So
yeah, well, and I got the privilege of previewing the product when it first came in to make sure that it would work with our audience, and I was in love with the fact that the way it was your daughter that taught the algebra, right?
Correct.
Yeah, and she was if I had been a student, I would have been very comfortable because she would have been more at my level, and she wasn't intimidated. She didn't start out saying, this is going to be nasty and you're going to have to put your thinking cap on. She just gave some really good tips on getting through it. And as I watched it, I was just like, man, I just wish I had that, because that was far from the experience I had the 2 times I took algebra. So I ended up taking like a community algebra course in order to finish my high school algebra. And that was even worse than the high school algebra. It was, yeah. So I absolutely love, some people will say it's a little folksy. Personally, I think folksy is good, especially when it comes to those topics, because it just helps you work through it and without being intimidating. So,
Yeah, in the world of the world of education, we even find this with the professional student. And I'm not a expert educator, even though that's the world I live in. But it's just communication. It's finding common ground with people and being able to step into their world and how to help them bridge the gap between where they are and where they need what you're trying to teach them. And unfortunately, that's not the way it always happens, as you alluded to. And,
Yeah.
that's been a lot of my experiences too.
Yeah.
Well, hey again to everybody jumping in over in Facebook and the app. Tim Dudley, my boss, would like everyone to know that he is here as well. If you have any questions or comments, be sure to drop them in, and we'll get to them a little bit later on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so I want to preface the conversation, and I think Dale would agree, and he's welcome also to comment. When we're talking about launching our children, we tend to put a lot of emphasis and try to prepare ourselves and prepare our children for what we think things should go. Scripture says, Proverbs 69, a man's heart plans his course, but the Lord determines his steps. And I know in my own life, that is so true, where I think I'm going in this direction, but the Lord has detours and other plans for us. And I think most important in this topic is really just seeking the Lord and knowing what his plans are and asking for wisdom, because he promises to give us wisdom. The launch is hard, and it's hard to know what to do, especially when it comes to the area of preparing our students for career and college. And one of the reasons, Dale, that I wanted you to kind of give some feedback is because you're in the world of college. And you see the university side of academia, and in some of our conversations, you've helped me a lot just navigating a little bit with my own kids. And so, what I'd like to ask you is some questions about in the university side, the spiritual side. Something that you've mentioned before is. It's not just an accidental or a coincidence that students lose their faith in college, that there are people that are very intentional about their discussions with students. And could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we have faculty members and I would say even administrators, and sometimes that are believers, and they're there. And I won't say that they're loud. There's been a few of them that are pretty vocal, but I've been shocked myself at finding the mentality. I mean, it's not unusual to hear things like, we need to help them unlearn all the things that their parents taught them. I mean, those words exactly I've heard from fairly high-level administrators in schools, from faculty. You hear the word helicopter parents in jest a lot, and some of that makes you justified, but yeah, you see a lot of that, and you certainly see, especially in the liberal arts side of things, you see a very anti-God view, or anti the Christian, faith anyway. I mean, obviously they're open to other kinds of faiths. Yeah, I mean, and I say that, and then on the other weird sense, because I was a fairly new Christian when I walked onto the campus as a faculty member, and spending time in industry, having conversations about faith, especially living in the South. Everybody was a believer, no matter what they were doing, what they were saying. They went to church, right?
Yeah.
At least on Easter. And but on campus, I found we're surrounded by Muslims and everybody from every faith, and they're very open. At least the student body was very open to talk about things. But there's a dark spirit that's there. There's glimmers of light, but there's a lot of darkness.
Yeah, I talk a little bit about like an anointing, When you have a pastoral anointing or a calling, there's a certain feeling that you just know this is a godly anointing that's here. And then when you step into others, you recognize that is absent, and you feel kind of the darkness associated with it. For parents, one of the things with Master Books, Where Faith Grows, we want parents to be rooting themselves or rooting their children to have a solid faith, so that if they do choose university level courses, that they know what they know and why they know it. Not, well, those are fairy tales and it can be easily shaken. What advice would you give to parents if college is one of those routes that they choose? What advice would you give to help prepare a student for stepping into that climate?
And boy, that's a tough one, because part of me, my wife and I took that on ourselves. I mean, what's God's view, what's God's responsibility, and what's our responsibility? So being a new Christian who had a lot of objection to Christianity from science, and that was me. I was arguing with pastors, a few years before I became a Christian. Matter of fact, that's how I became a Christian. Or through that path. So we did a lot of apologetics type studies in our home. So our daughters could quote significant things, excruciatingly well prepared, until you walked on campus. Because I think and I hear that a lot from parents. They'll say, well, Johnny's very prepared. Johnny really knows what he believes. And I think, and I always think about the verse in the Bible that talks about, when you think you're standing firm, be careful that you don't fall. I see that happen all the time. And I don't know, we all see it because we all know it, but I see strong, believing Christians that sometimes as students are engaging non-Christians on campus for ministry, and the conversion goes the other direction. And it's so one of our daughters is gotten in that. She walked away from Christ, and she's still at this moment in the struggle that she's going through because of that. And she's just one of thousands. And I think that's the one that it's the humility that you don't walk in. And I see a lot of students will walk in and it's a cockiness that they have. I believe, I know what I believe, I can take on this faculty. You can't. You're wrong. And it's not to say you can't win an argument. You might, but 4 years surrounded by not just faculty, but other students. And I think the students that you're surrounded by are more dangerous than the faculty. Because you're surrounded by a whole bunch of people who, for the first time in their life, had complete freedom. Some of them don't have any foundation of what they believe, and they're excruciatingly influential to you. It's your peer group, and that's the most devastating thing that we see happening. A lot more, and the faculty have their own issues, and they certainly add to that. But it's a really weird environment, and to think about, we send. To me, from a spiritual battle, sending your children to military boot camp and maybe into harm's way that way is less dangerous than it is from a spiritual aspect being on campus.
Yeah. Wow. Well, you'd mentioned that to me in the past, and I just we have the work that Ken Ham did. Even with Christian colleges, sometimes we think because a college claims to be Christian, but they use the same textbooks as a lot of the secular universities. I was amazed when my daughter went to a Christian college and was studying psychology that her textbook was produced by a secular publisher, and what she was being taught was the exact same thing I had been taught in my psychology classes. It wasn't from a godly perspective. Now, there was some godly chatter in the course, and it was Christian, and there was a little bit of debate, but it really was amazing as to how similar it was. So we don't have that safety. And a lot of universities hire professors that have been trained at secular universities, have the same mindsets as secular professors. So at a higher level, we just have to be so aware of what the children are stepping into.
Yeah, because I remember somebody called me from Brigham Young. I think it's Brigham Young. That's the Mormon University. So I was on the phone with a mentor as I was looking at, hey, possibly is the faculty position even make sense to me? And he said, well, Brigham Young has got these things. I think they would like a person like you. He says, you got to be Mormon. Just tell me Mormon. And he didn't mean anything terrible about what he said, but you see that in Christian universities. Really, all you got to do is say you believe this. But because the university model, what we rate universities on by some of the rating systems, is highly connected to the faculty.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, if you look at U.S. News and World Report ratings, it has very little to do with how great you teach the students, and which is bizarre. It's like a good old boy network. I mean, literally, it's a good old boy network. And so you want to get faculty members that have certain credentials and these things. And even if you're a Christian university or something, you're still straddled with those kind of issues because you're still competing in the same market.
Right. You mentioned something about the students that as well. And I think one of the things that we have to be aware of is that one of our greatest needs in life is to belong. We do not enjoy rejection. I mean, I think God built it into us, the desire for connection. We connect to God, our creator, and we connect to each other. And when there comes a time where I feel disconnected from the people I'm surrounded with, that's very vulnerable, it changes my perceptions. And so almost the condition sets itself up where we take a student and we move them away from their social group and place them into a new peer group. And then they're not prepared for that dynamic. That then opens the door to how do I become accepted? Obviously, standing up for my values and my faith didn't work, and I'm still being rejected. I'm the odd man out. I think they become more receptive to a message that says this will help me to belong, because rejection is such a painful dynamic in our psyche.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, I can't. Psychology is not my field, and even if it was, I would be guessing. But I do know. We tell our kids this is because we often hear the words. Well, I'm ministering to my friends, whoever that is, that are non-believers that are doing these things. And I remember telling one of our daughters, because logically, we all know as humans that's justification, that we're spending time hanging around. And my daughter used to tell us, well, Jesus hung around with sinners. And we would always but he spent a whole lot of time, look at where he spent most of his time. It was with the fold and probably even alone just with God. But there's this, I think there's this, even with the believers, there's this well-meaning, idea that we're going out there to minister into the world, and there are those that happen. There are certainly those Christians, and I've seen a young girl that come through our engineering program. She was homeschooled. She was an excellent student, and the best I can tell, she walked out just a strong faith as she walked in. But she was a very strong person, but she spent a whole lot of time with the campus ministries, and she spent a whole lot of time with her church. So she kind of had that enfolding going on.
Yeah.
And I've seen that with a lot of parents is they're like, I'm not going to send you to University X unless you get involved in the campus ministry and heavily involved, because they're all there. There are at most every major university, there's lots of campus. I mean, there's some that you obviously don't want to be involved in, but there's lots of really solid campus ministries that are surrounding that. And you find churches surrounding those big campuses go inside and do things and are very active. So the opportunities are there, if that's what the students do. But students are busy. I mean, what sells on college campuses? So if any of the parents are looking at college campuses today, the message that we have doing our marketing research is that what sells a student has nothing to do with academics, might have a little bit to do with football or some other sport at the right school, but it's the environment. So we spend a boatload of money on green spaces and dorms and making things modern and looking nice, on student activities, and we have more vice presidents of student activities than we have faculty at the time. We have a lot of administration, but we also have vice presidents of equity and inclusion, and you hear a lot of that. And you cannot speak against that on campuses. I mean, without getting beat with a stick. I mean, so the campuses are building, and I don't mean from a negative point of view, but just from a raw marketing point of view. They are trying to build an environment that attracts any kind of student that has money. From a marketing perspective, that probably makes good sense. But some of the things we stand up are, and then students clamor too, are certainly not the things that we want to be doing.
Yeah. So, okay, let's shift a little bit to an actual launch. Like, I think even when you start out, the mindset that we had very early on was, in order for our students to be successful in life, we need to prepare them for college. That's the next step. And then they go to college because statistics tell us somebody with a 4-year degree makes $30,000 a year more than a student who doesn't go to college. And so we place that as there's this huge pressure to prepare this student to move to a university right out of high school. Now that I've played at this parenting game a little bit longer, and Kristen has, I think we've changed our views a little bit. Well, I'd say quite a bit, just because of experience and what we've seen. And how do you feel about that? The idea of, I start my college fund because as important as everything else, when they're 5, I have the jar for college, and we're even choosing colleges. And I don't want to trash the college experience as much as I think I'm looking at people. It's step back and ask yourself, why is the college experience important? And so this is just, to get some more insight into that.
Yeah, it's the most bizarre thing in the world. And I look at this from a business point of view. Think about it. The university system has got the greatest marketing machine in the world. What other thing in the world do we start saving money for the minute our children are born for the right to pay for that service? I mean, that's how powerful the marketing message of what you just said is. It's massively powerful, and we see it around us. Very strong believing families that saving money, that really think they're doing the best thing they can do for their children by preparing them for college. They drag them to every sporting event, trying to get them to be, get an academic scholarship and anything under the sun that you can do that in. And you're right. I think there's a lot of things in college. I kind of want my brain surgeon to have gone to school. I mean, there's a lot of things there that makes sense. But what we try to do is look at it from it's kind of a return on investment. When you send somebody to college, what's the outcome? What's the desired outcome? I've noticed that a lot of parents, and I probably was there early on, was the outcome was to get Johnny and Susie into college. And now you realize that's just another product. That's just another book, or it's just another course, it's just another system. What's really the desired outcome? And a lot of these students when they show up at the college campus, they don't really know what the outcome looks like. They don't they come into our engineering school and we'll ask them, who do you know that's an engineer? Sometimes they know, but a lot of times they're like, we don't know what the life of an engineer looks like at all. Then why are you about to spend $100,000 in 4 years and punish yourself? They just have no concept of what it looks like that they're diving into. And, hence you see a lot of people that come out.
Yeah.
And they find that they don't, I don't really like this, or halfway through, or maybe it's one term into it.
Yeah.
But you said something that's very interesting. You say the statistics show, and I always find that interesting because the statistical chart, and you probably have, we've all seen it, that the average salary of a high school grad, undergraduate degree, graduate degree, PhD, and it's this nice little chart. If you ever look at who puts that chart out, it's the College Board. And that's the same company who writes the SAT, ACT stuff, and they're heavily invested. So I'm not saying statistics are a lie, but you get the questions you ask for, but they're certainly biased because our whole culture is based upon the fact that if you got anything going, you're going to go to college. And if you're just dumb as dirt, you're not. I mean, that's the message that's out there, and unfortunately, there's some of that is true, and so it's a very biased statistic because, I mean, we see great kids come through engineering school that are really bright, but you know what? They're going to be bright and industrious if they don't come to school.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to make it happen no matter what, because they're valuable, they're hard workers, somebody's going to put them to work, and or they're going to find their way. And and we'll have graduates actually tell us, it was great that I got the degree, I didn't really learn that much. And this is even in engineering, which is very practical. I didn't really learn enough to do the job, but I got a degree, and then the job kind of taught me what I needed to know. But we hear that all the time.
Yeah.
And it's not just our university, it's all across the board. And I'm finding other students tell me, we got the degree, and the degree was awesome, but it's Udemy, the online video courses for $9.99. It's Udemy that made my career.
Exactly.
Which is, from a university perspective, is a really scary message.
Yeah.
So from a marketing. But I think the message that I think about is if you're a parent, you go to wisdom, and it's not that I'm trying to talk Johnny or Susie out of college. It's think about what the game is. What are you trying to achieve? And if that path of that university or that degree is the right path, awesome. Then you need obviously go into it with fear and trembling a little bit and carefulness, but usually they don't. They're showing up. Just because and I think they're showing up for the experience.
Yeah.
And that's what the marketing message is that we're getting at the university, and that strong believing people in our marketing team. By the way, there's at our university's marketing team, they go to church with me, and but they understand the message is if you want to recruit students, and you're going to spend mega bucks to recruit them, you sell an experience.
Yeah. Well, as a parent too, I took as much pride in the university that we sent my daughter to. I enjoyed wearing the sweatshirt too. In fact, the only reason I wanted to go for my undergrad was I wanted the sweatshirt. They had the coolest sweatshirt. It was $45. I just didn't feel right wearing it if I didn't take classes. It's a true story. But
so really the $45 was the cheap part.
Exactly. But I could say I wore the shirt. A couple of things that you had mentioned about the statistics. If you do a search, you go to Google and do a search for successful people who dropped out of college. It's amazing the list of world leaders that we have who have decided, from Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg, David Green founded Hobby Lobby, somebody who's fairly successful, borrowed $600 and dropped out. I think we can certainly make the argument that it's not needed to be successful, although there are some fields that are definitely the training and the expertise is. So then we talked about Udemy being kind of a micro learning atmosphere. In business, it seems so counterintuitive, because in business, I don't want to play to my weaknesses. Right? I'm not good at math, so don't put me near the accounting department. I'm not good at details, so don't put me in editing, because I really don't care. But marketing, understanding consumer behaviors, motivation, how to appeal to somebody, like I just light up. That's my strength. So it seems almost like the other model of not focusing on strengths. Even with our children, sometimes we talk a lot about the weaknesses that our children have. We don't look at how to emphasize the strengths. What do you see with that?
Yeah, and as parents, I think we all feel it, and it's not like you and I can sit here and say ideally that we should focus on strengths and then not look at our children and say, well, Johnny can't do something, and Sally can, because it's fear, it's driving that. But it is interesting, I always like to use the analogy of professional baseball. If you look at a professional baseball pitcher, and he's being paid millions of dollars a year, usually they're lousy batters. I mean, they're terrible. They, it's a laughing when they get to the plate with a bat in their hand, and it's just expected for most of them. So what makes sense is if I'm going to focus on his weakness, I take him to batting school, and I have the coaches work with the batting. But if he's a lousy batter and I double his performance, he's still a lousy batter statistically in the game. But if I can increase the speed of his pitch by fractions of a mile per hour, I'm winning the entire year. And so you see that kind of mentality in business models is I want to focus on somebody's strength and make them stronger in the strength. And so I gave a talk like this, and it was into a homeschooling group, and I was making fun. I said, think about Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple, and if anybody knows anything about his story, he's not the guy you want to work for. You have to be a strange bird to want to work for him, because he was a tyrant. People skills was not his strong suit. Brilliant at marketing, brilliant at many things, but so you can imagine the board of directors saying, Steve, we're going to send you, you're really weak in people skills, so we're going to send you off and do some training to soften you up. And it might have worked, but now he's probably totally ineffective at running and driving the total innovation machine he did. God creates us all this weird quirkiness that we have, and we're not all, and it's like we all drive to average. Yeah. I want everybody to be equal coming out, and that's the school system does that. We put grades A, B, C, and D on students all through school and even the university, and we want them to all be able to walk and chew gum the same. And that's not very useful in the industry.
Yeah, no, in fact,
I do need skill sets. I need people who are on fire to do different things, and you said it, passionate, because what sells. I work with a lot of entrepreneurial companies, and the thing they hire more than anything is passion. I want somebody who's passionate to do this, because if you're passionate to do something, if you love what you do, I don't have to drive you.
Yeah.
I have to actually slow you down and say, no, you're getting ahead of yourself, and that's what, if you've got passion for a particular field, you're never really going to have to work hard to find work.
Right. Yeah. One of the things, as soon as I get into the business world, like a phrase I used to hear all the time was, let the big dog hunt. Don't keep him on the porch, just let him hunt. We'll find handlers to deal with jobs. We'll just find handlers to help make his employees feel better, but don't hold him back, because you're doing such a disservice to him. So, yeah. Well, as a parent with launching, so we talked about college, and I think really when it comes to college, it's a personal choice. I think families really have to pray and ask for wisdom with that. Know that there are some things that can steal faith. Know that it's not necessarily the only way a person succeeds in life. But as a parent, and you've launched some children, what would be a couple of things that you would give advice? And I know it's scary, right? The older we get and the more experience we have as parents, the less advice I like to give people. But what would be some things that you would say, if you could tell yourself, if you were able to speak into your own life 20 years ago when you started this parenting journey, what would you tell yourself?
Yeah, and I love what you just said, because I work with, there's an entrepreneur friend of mine that has sold multiple companies, and he made a comment to me not long ago. He said, 1 year after I sold my first company, if you would have asked me for advice, I could have told you how to do it. It would have been awesome, and I was brilliant. He said, now that I've done it 6 or 7 times, and you ask me my advice, I'm like, it's just difficult. and there's, because he's developed a certain humility and realized that there's no two situations alike. There's no two companies alike. There's no two children alike. And even we as parents were different with everybody else. But I think the one thing that I did not do a lot early on was seek wise counseling, and seek a lot of it. In seeking it in prayer and just stopping, because, and I'm going to guess I'm fairly typical of anybody in America, and just kind of our can-do spirit. We take on and think, well, we can fix it, we can make it better, I can go out and do it, and maybe not. Stopping and just saying, let's wait on God to tell us what to do, and let's go ask for some wisdom for these kind of things, and get a lot of that around us. A lot more humility, and I think maybe that even rubs off on our children, because I think that's one of the things, or that is one of the things I see with students these days. There's not a lot of humility. And you asked earlier, do they call me doctor? Early on when I taught undergraduates, which is fairly rare, usually yes, it's very formal. And if somebody comes to this country from India or somewhere else, it's very formal. They treat you like royalty. I mean, seriously, they treat faculty members like you're a king walking down the hallway. They'll stand aside. I mean, it's a bizarre feeling. American students at 18 years old, no, they'll call you by your first name. Now, and it's there's just this, and it's not because they're Christian or anything else. Just there's just not a lot of humility. There's not a lot of respect.
Yeah, you call me by my first name.
I do call you by your first name. Well, we work together, and so many times it's just easier to refer to him as Randy to my coworkers, because they know immediately who I'm talking about.
Maybe doctor. You could just start with a doctor.
Do you want Dr. Randy or Dr. Pratt?
Dr. Randy.
Your holiness would be okay too, right?
Yeah. Only at home. I definitely, how difficult it is launching, and every child is so unique. It's just one size doesn't fit all. And I would say to stop and think, right? Over 50 to 60% of our day, we go through autopilot. We're not even aware. I get up, I take a shower, I get my coffee, I get in the car. Half the time, I'm just thinking about what am I going to do when I get to work. I'm not even thinking about what I'm actually doing. And sometimes as a parent, it's easy to do that, where you get stuck in just the day-to-day, and we're in the mindless part of our brain. We're not in the, we're intuitively going through the day, but we're not thinking. And I think sometimes actually just stopping and doing an assessment and saying, what am I doing as a dad that's helping? And what am I doing that's harming? And what should I be focused on? Where should I stop? Who is my child? As we get further along, all of my children are different. Sometimes you just have to stop and say, this child that I'm dealing with today is unique, and here's what makes them tick. Now, I'm fortunate that number 6? My 6th son, he tells me all the time, this is what my disc profile is. This is what my Briggs-Meyer is. This is, he's 15 years old, but he gives me instruction in how to deal with him because, Dad, that with my personality type, you're just counterintuitive to the way I operate. So I'm fortunate that now my kids coach me in how to parent them. So I'm happy I've exposed them to that.
We appreciate it.
And they know my personality type too, so they play me all the time. Something else that I did, and I'd love your input on this. We came to a place where I believe that something that gives me a strong desire with raising my children is that I will stand accountable for the way I stewarded my responsibility as a parent, and to stand before Almighty God and give an account. I want to make sure that I hear, well done, faithful servant, that I've done my best. There comes a place in our children's lives where I've had to actually sit down and say, I have done that to the best of my ability. I've made my mistakes. We've picked ourselves up and moved forward. But I no longer have the influence. I no longer have the control in your life to be responsible. I can't carry the burden. It's not even healthy anymore for me to carry this burden for your spiritual walk and the actions and things that you've done. And so before God, I'm giving you now responsibility for your life. Now, when you stand before the Lord, you'll say, I made this choice and I did this, and I'm releasing this. I'm releasing this as your dad. Because it felt like I was just going insane trying to control all the variables. And the older they get, I can't anymore. And they're making choices. They're going out with different people. They're doing different things. And they're making choices. And I can't just kind of be there to pick up the pieces or control those variables. And actually, it was hard to let go of that. But it's also been kind of healthy in a way, too, because now we both see that they're responsible for the decisions they make, the friends they have, the choices they have. What do you feel like? How's that strike you?
And the fact that you say that, though, that's some of the wisdom, is when you hear other people say that are ahead of you. Right, for a parent that has a child that's younger, that maybe hasn't made that decision, you just got to let go and say, this is in God's hands. I've done my part imperfectly. And I know there's some strong believing people I know that their children have walked away from the Lord, and they or done other things. Maybe they're still with the Lord, but they've done other stupid things because they're human, right? And and you just watch them and you realize they're at peace with that because it's no longer on. It's not like the psychologists tell you it's all mommy's fault, which I'm happy about that because it's not dad's, it's mom's. So, but that's not true. When you see people who have walked the path and like friends of ours that everything they did, at least from my perspective, was perfect. And then they've got children that are just bizarre old grown children, bizarre off the rails. And you're like, what's God's purpose? What's he doing? I have no idea. But there's some peace in that. I heard somebody speak not too long ago saying, we sometimes feel like we're not capable of raising our children. And he said, that's ridiculous. God gave it to you, or you're questioning God.
Yeah.
And even to me, I was thinking, well, okay, so I at least have the tools I need that I've been given. But yet you don't control that outcome.
Yeah.
And you'd be crazy to try to control the outcome, and you're going to be crazy, And for me, I watched my father, and you just start to realize he doesn't speak a lot to even his grown children, telling them what to do. There's just a whole lot of listening and every now and then saying something. And I've always kind of wondered, what's going on there. And just now I'm beginning to get a glimmer of, realizing they're not going to listen anyway. And it's comical. And that's the one thing my wife and I are constantly realizing is we made this statement. We said, do you think, that you think our parents thought we were kind of stupid when we were younger? And my wife says, I think they still do.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's always somebody ahead of us. There's always somebody that sees things clearer than we do. And yeah, boy, but you gotta let go. I'm convinced of that. I think you gotta let go.
Yeah, for me, I had it's almost a ceremony. It's almost I'm handing you the keys for your life now. I can't do this anymore, right? It's yours, and it's on you. It's your bad now. It's not, I should have done harder, because let's face it, you had a perfect upbringing. If you mess it up, it's on you. It's not me.
I mean, it does bring about the more awareness, my actions are my own now.
There's a weightiness to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't blame you for anything anymore, because it's all on me. Yeah,
especially the helicopter parent thing. I've realized in some ways, my kids didn't have enemies. I took their enemies, right? If there was somebody who was being mean to them, I'd take on their parents and we'd distance ourselves or whatever. So I've fought all their battles. Their wins were my wins, but I wanted them to win. So I did what it took. They didn't necessarily have to struggle. So now all of a sudden, as they become adults, we almost have to say, hey, just so you know, there's some struggles ahead of you that you might not have known about, because I did that for you. And I think in the homeschooling side, especially, because we do have control over some variables, it's something we have to be aware of. That.
Yeah, but you see that in not just, and we make fun of that a little bit in the homeschooling or the Christian, view, but you see that in everybody, and you think about the sports that, has, everybody gets a trophy, and that has nothing to do with faith. That's just our culture. And that's also as parents, whether we're believers or not, we want the best for our children, and we want them to do these things, and we want to protect them. And that's I'm gonna assume that's a gift. Gift curse, I'm not real sure. But yeah, but at some point in time, the kids grow up and realize, it's not that easy.
Yeah. I remember as a kid watching birds jump out of the nest, and then they'd sit there on the ground, and they'd always be like, you don't touch them, you can't touch them. And the cat is sneaking around, and every now and then the cat enjoyed picking one up, and it's so hard not to get involved, where I would when my kids leave the nest, to fly down and catch them, fly them up, let them see what it's like at a high altitude, and then they just catch their flight and live happily ever after. We've been real blessed in a lot of ways with our launches, but I know, having to allow that struggle in the launch is there. We're going to ask if there's any questions. One thing that we had touched on, as you and I were talking this week earlier a little bit, is about the use of a transition year or a transition period coming out of school. I know for me, I went right into college. It finished my 2-year, then I had about 10 years of life and went back to an executive program. I got a lot out of the executive program, but I was an adult. I had children, I had life experience. I was a lot more grounded than I was at 18. And how do you feel about a transition time?
I find it a weird thing to say. It's kind of like, let's put life on pause for a while. And I'm not necessarily disagreeing. I'm surprised, because our one daughter did that. Then she ended up at college, and boy, it was a mess. I will say, from the university side, the students that we see that have real experience, I'm not saying a transition year, but maybe they went to work, they went in the military, they come back, they're a lot more serious. They can handle a lot of things. They know how to manage their time. But what I see a lot of transition years is kind of like this, at least my observation is kind of like this find yourself, and they don't look very pretty.
Yeah.
To me, because, it's like there's find yourself, just look in the mirror, and I mean, that's our culture. So I kind of got mixed reviews on it, and I'm sure it depends on the person and what they do. So what our 19-year-old son is doing now, he's decided he doesn't want to go to college because he just sees there's no value in it for what he's doing. He's not doesn't have a desire to be a brain surgeon. He started a business, and so he's looking at, how do you do that? Now, who knows? He might go back to school. He might do, who knows what he'll do.
Right.
I know lots of people who did kind of this. I got out of high school, just started a business for a year, and now they're still running that business and very successfully many years later, and decided they don't, no reason to go back. So yeah, I don't know what that means about the transition year. I will say what's going to happen to you though is if you as a parent have any thought towards college, or your son or daughter has any thought towards college, the college is going to make that difficult, because we reward first time. I mean, we call it first time freshman. There's this term, which means you came straight from high school to the university. And we get rated on those numbers. I mean, colleges get all these rankings, all the tuition. I mean, all the scholarship dollars are for first-time freshmen straight out of high school. So there's a lot of pressure not to do things like that. Not to say you can't find scholarship dollars or anything, but let's say 90% of it falls on the other.
Yeah.
And that's what we're after. If a student tells us, I'm going to take a transition year, and we're like, from the university system, we'd be like, no, let me give you some money and talk you out of that. So the world really pushes against anything like that.
Yeah. Well, I think any distance you have, maturity, life experience, any of that would be a challenge. It's much easier to take them straight out of school where they're in that mode of school and bring them in directly, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, it's an easier marketing target, but really what it comes down to is you get what you measure, and the measurement of the universities. Like if I went in and brought in 1,000 undergraduate students that had, maybe they were military experience, they came from somewhere else and they're not fresh out, versus 1,000 straight out of high school, the reward is for the 1,000 straight out of high school.
Yeah.
The system, that's the system measurements. I'm not knocking them, because we kind of all compete against each other in those. So in the universities as a whole, you have to kind of dig deep and say, what is it they measure for success? And when you start looking at that, some of it's eye-opening.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, to me, any kind of, if the student has work experience or some experiences where they've had to kind of figure out what the world looks like working, they understand better what they want. It's hard to know what you want to do when you've never done anything. And
yeah. My opportunity opened up because the company used the Haynes pay grade scale. So as soon as you earned your degree, you just got more money because you had a degree on your name. Didn't matter that the position didn't change. Just saying I had my 4-year was enough to qualify me to make substantially more money. But they paid for the education. And so it was one of those, especially in an executive program, where now I knew what I wanted. I knew what my skills were, and I was able to, the executive programs are more mentoring. I felt like I had strong mentors that really helped. And, the people that were in there weren't as bent on changing my worldview as they were teaching me about, hey, when you're in business, this is something you might encounter when you're doing international marketing, So I think there's a big difference in programs as well to be considered. like you're saying. So,
Yeah.
Or I put words in your mouth instead, like you're saying, but that works too. Hey, do we have?
You did say, I mean, and Carrie, that there's this mind of I want to change people's worldview, and in some faculty that is absolutely the case. But overall, that's not the intent. That's just what happens.
Yeah.
The intent is we think we're making you a better person for society. I mean, they really try. You watch the news, right? We see that, that, and what a lot dominates politics. A lot of is comes out in the university system. So yeah, it's not just I want to change your worldview. I think I'm doing the right thing for you to be the better person in society, and
Gotcha.
It just so happens it might change your worldview.
Yeah. Well, do we have any questions?
Yeah, we had one over in the app, kind of jumping back to your discussion on faith and peer pressure. Carrie Bailey asked, what is the difference of the effects in online versus attending university? What would be your thoughts on that, Dr. Callahan?
Being an online university or something like that?
Versus attending the university.
That's a hard one, and I don't know, because your peers are going to be different. You're going to be more online. There's not a lot of data because there's not a whole lot until today. And tomorrow, from now on, there will be a whole lot of major brand name universities that are online. But right now, we don't see a lot of that. So, but what we notice from the executive programs that we use online, and so since you kind of did an executive program, one of the things that we want in the executive program is we want a lot of networking. And so it's a different animal. So we're trying to get different companies talking to each other and networking. When we were doing that live, they would have, the break between class conversations, and that was awesome. So those relationships were deeper. We have to work harder online. We got people in different states and different countries to create those relationships. So I would think just to guess from an undergraduate population is it certainly it puts things a little bit of a distance. Now from it also puts you in an environment with weird characters nothing about really, because they're on a video. All they are is a little dot on a video, and you don't really know a lot about them, and you get to know them. And we see a lot of kids, high schooler kids, get in those kind of situations that they get to know somebody from this little dot, and becomes negative.
Yeah.
So I would think but gut would be it's safer, but I don't think we have any data to show that.
Right. Sarah Ashley over in the app asked, what is an executive program?
It's a fancy term for we charge more money. So what we mean by an executive program is we require industry experience, people to come into our programs, and we do charge more money. That is a true statement. They usually do charge a significant amounts more money, and you see this around the country. But we take people who are professionals already and bring them into a leadership program.
Generally, like my executive program, they would say you're far beyond what your typical four-year student would have graduating college, but you don't have the piece of paper. And they actually, the leadership component was, you have the chops to do your job. That's already been proven. Now let's focus a little bit on refining it in the leadership side.
Yeah. But and all, if we look at these things, because especially if you're looking at buying a degree, and that's what you're doing, by the way, I always tell people when your universities are offering a service, and you are the consumer, and it's a lot like going to Walmart. Well, actually, it's more like going to your Mercedes dealership. Maybe it's even more expensive than that, but you're buying a very, very, very expensive. It's like shopping for a home. Let me put it that. A very expensive product, and they all have different things to offer, and we title things in different ways to make them appealing.
Yeah.
And so you really got, and I think what you said, Randy, is you got to really think, and pull back the layers and say, what is it that, what am I doing? What am I getting out of it? And sometimes the answer is this is a huge win. And if that's the case, awesome.
One of the questions is what university you're representing. I just want to make sure that I specify the views and opinions here are Dale's, right? And I invited him in as a friend because when he calls and we have a conversation, I enjoy the conversation, and I thought it would be really good to have just kind of an open conversation between you and I of our views and what you've experienced and as parents. And also it helps that you have experience in the university as well that might give some insights for parents as they consider the launch. So
yeah, we are actively recruiting for engineering students. So I mean, I'm in the dean's office. I'm an associate dean, and so I do represent the university. I represent the school. I mean, I'm not saying anything here I wouldn't say straight to their faces, and have many times, and many of them would say it straight to my faces. I mean, this is not we're not apologetic for what we're doing. As a Christian, sometimes we might find it wrong, or we might feel it's wrong. It's just, but yeah, we're actively recruiting for anybody interested in the work. And I'll say this for every university in the nation: any student who is strong technically, and by that I mean engineering, math, science, and some of those skill sets. There's a massive demand for those students.
And something that you've also said to me with the companies you've worked for, right? One thing that they want is students who can think.
Yes.
There's a demand for students that can actually think.
Yeah, and that's not as easy as it sounds.
Yeah, no. My son took a job at a technical manufacturer, and he's done fairly well advancing, just because sometimes he'll walk up to supervisors and say, have you guys even thought about what you're doing? Like this doesn't even make sense. Like it's backwards, and but it's just a lacking.
Well, I'll say this from a teaching our kids point of view, and this is where our big benefit in our executive program is thinking, is what we call critical thinking. And that comes from, so what we teach these people in the executive program, which I think is really wise for all of us, is to ask a lot of what we would call grandma questions. Why are we doing this? So we have had significant company turnarounds, like when we had employees in our program, we require them to go back and talk to their bosses and ask questions about what do we value, what's the most important thing we do for the company, and what would be, you would think is common sense questions, but we don't do that very often.
Yep.
But I think even teaching our children that, to ask a lot of questions, not accusatory questions, but what does matter, and why are we doing this? Because that's critical thinking. It's just, and I call them grandma questions because they're just the questions your grandmother would ask you. What are you doing, and why are you doing that? That looks stupid from where I'm sitting.
Yeah.
And that's, but that we hear that all the time. I get these phone calls. Critical thinking is what we want.
There's that story of the family that's preparing for the holiday, and so the mom pulls out a ham and cuts the ends of the ham off and then puts it in the oven, and they ask, well, why did you cut the ends off? And she's like, I don't know. That's just what we've always done. So they call grandma and ask grandma, why did you cut the ends off the ham? And she said, because I didn't have a pan big enough to hold the ham. And I think because of the way our brains work, it really is important that we get into the habit of teaching our kids. Ask yourself, why are you doing this? What are you doing that's hurting you? What can you do to help yourself? How do you move yourself forward? What are your friends doing? We evaluate a lot of times people that are in social circles and just say, how do you think that's hurting them? Like, what could they be doing better? And just that dialogue of thinking through the issues to create more of a habit of thinking.
We could use a society that thinks a little bit more, yeah. Because if you take your ham situation and put it into a corporate setting, which I see almost daily, it's a multi-million-dollar loss, and we're not thinking about why we're doing what we've done years ago for a reason why, and now something's different, you know. And you see consultants are paid massive amounts of money to ask those grandma questions to solve those problems, and that's that. I mean, matter of fact, the entire consulting industry is built upon asking, "Why are you doing this?"
Yeah, my kids, because marketing is just, I mean, I breathe it. And I love listening to them talk about these commercials where they'll go like, well, man, they missed the mark. Like, that made me feel negative. It gave bad associations. Like, I don't even remember what manufacturer that was, you know, because we do that with marketing all the time. We copy what people have done, and it's like, it's money wasted. So that has nothing to do with this topic, but I could talk about that all day. So awesome. Well, Dale, I appreciate you coming on and chatting with us, and hopefully this was at least some food for thought for some people that are in the process of launching and thinking. If you have any questions, feel free to post. We are privileged that Dale is actually part of the Moms of Master Books group, and I value his contribution and your wife's contribution as well. I know she's part of the group, and you guys provide an awesome service to people who are doing math, and hopefully we can continue to work together.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah. All right, guys. We'll have a blessed week. And feel free to ask any questions you have. Was there anything? We got everything.
Yeah, we got them.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, guys. We'll talk to you later. God bless.